Woody, somebody's whispering in your ear. Everything's gonna be okay.
What is good, everyone? It is your guy, Don James, and welcome back to the 5 Years Later series. If you're new to the channel, I'm doing a series where I break down every billion-dollar film from 2019 to get a sense of how well it's aged. So if you're interested in that, please don't subscribe. I'm going breaking Texas 101. Today we will be talking about Toy Story 4. By the way, thank goodness I did an update on my thumbnail, because this was my first draft. Like, what the heck is this? You can't even see bro's face. Well, anyways, Toy Story 4 is definitely going to be an interesting movie to analyze because this is quite a controversial film. Like, some people love it and consider it one of the best Toy Story movies, and some people make 6-hour dissertations that have almost 1 million views. So yeah, this should be fun. Anyways, here's the format, and let's get right on into this. So, was Toy Story 4 always part of Pixar's plan? Well, I'm sure you could have guessed it, but after directing Toy Story 2, John Lasseter's great vision was, you know that background porcelain doll who almost never went on any of the adventures? Why don't we end the series by having Woody go off and be with her? Okay, maybe that's not exactly how it went down, but according to Pixar, plans for this movie had actually started quite early. Shortly before the release of Toy Story 3, the primary screenwriter for Toy Story 1, which starred Tom Hanks as Woody and Tim Allen as Buzz, and the screenwriter for Toy Story 2, which also starred Tom Allen as Woody and Tim Hanks as Buzz, as well as Joanne Cusack as Jessie, as well as the screenwriter for Toy Story 3. Let's start over, shall we? Shortly before the release of Toy Story 3, the primary screenwriter for the Toy Story trilogy, Andrew Stanton, was actually working on an outline for Toy Story 4. Around that time, the then studio had John Lasseter liked the idea, and he was initially supposed to be the director of the movie. In an interview with LA Times, Lasseter stated that Toy Story 4 was set to be released on June 16th, 2017. If there's one thing I've learned from doing this series, the initial release date almost never happens. Because of developmental issues, Toy Story's release date eventually got pushed back to 2019, which forced Incredibles 2 to be released earlier than expected, which is probably why the main villain in that movie sucked harder than this slushy guy. Lasseter also stated in the interview that although many may think that they're making this sequel for business reasons, he stated that they only make sequels out of pure passion. At the same time, he was also the one to direct this Cars, which, even if you like Cars 2, I think you could still understand how many people could reasonably see that movie as an attempt to sell more merchandise. So in other words, I'm going to put that statement under the "that's what they all say" category. I mean, do you really think the marketers of these two crimes against humanity admitted that they were cash grabs?
Once I really read the story, I sort of thought it sounded quite a charming tale of these things that you use in your life all the time, the notion that they might have a personality.
This one, I think, is one of the top ones of the franchise. It's really fun. It's really fun. Filled with jokes, and it's got a really good storyline.
The best way to gauge this would probably just be to see how much effort was put into the movie. Anyways, let's get out of this rabbit trail. In 2015, Josh Cooley was revealed to be the co-director for the movie. Then, at the 2017 D23 Expo, suddenly Lasseter decided to step down and leave Cooley to be the sole director. There were a lot of vague reasons given, but the main reason seems to be that Lasseter just had a lot of responsibilities. He had a lot of animated projects that he had to oversee, so he wanted to leave the directing for Toy Story 4 to someone else. Plus, he soon got booted by the company altogether, so there's that too. The initial script focused on a romantic comedy, but after major rewrites, it was stated that Toy Story 4 would also heavily focus on pitting Woody against his worst fear, which was apparently to be a lost toy. Well, that didn't seem to be his worst fear when he was ready to collect dust in a museum, but whatever. Anyways, it was time for casting. Basically all of the OG characters reprised their roles, but unfortunately Don Rickles, the voice of Mr. Potato Head, died before he could record any lines. So, Pixar decided to just reuse old audio lines from his past roles. As for the newer characters, Tony Hale was cast to voice Forky, Key and Peele were cast to voice Duck. Whoa! I don't know who selected that footage, but can we get some different footage right there? Thank you! So Key and Peele were cast to voice Ducky and Bunny, and Keanu Reeves was cast to voice
Duke Kaboom, Canada's greatest stuntman.
And for the roles of Ducky and Bunny and Duke Kaboom, there was a specific emphasis on letting the voice actors do a lot of improv for how the personalities for those three characters would be. Throughout the promotional tour for the movie, it was highly reported that Tim Allen and Tom Hanks got so emotional throughout the last scene of the film that they struggled to finish their lines. Well, that's probably over now. Anyways, Toy Story 4 premiered on June 11th, 2019 at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood, Los Angeles. Then it was released to theaters on June 21st. After its release, Toy Story 4 actually dethroned Incredibles 2 to become the biggest opening for an animated film ever, until it was dethroned like a month later by the Lion King remake, which was also dethroned by Frozen 2, which was also dethroned by Illumination's 2023 The Super Mario. But Toy Story 4 eventually passed the $1 billion mark on August 13th of 2019, which was only the 8th highest grossing movie of 2019. Like, wow. Man, oh man, is the reception for this movie complicated. Of course, many people were extremely worried and skeptical before even entering the theaters, viewing Toy Story 3 as the perfect ending. But then, the reviews started to come in and they looked pretty solid. So, people entered the theaters with a little more optimism, and from the surface level, it would seem like everyone loved it. But boy, that is just the surface level. So starting with the usual, we're just going to do a quick rundown of the three main review aggregate websites. Henry? Where's Bob? What?
If you like to talk to tomatoes.
Oh, there you are, Bob. Wait, how did you survive?
I don't know. Fair enough.
Alright, anyways, Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 97%, which strangely is the lowest reviewed of the Toy Story movies. And ignore that stupid verified rating score. Man, I despise verified rating. So the aggregation of all of the audience was a 91. So 3% lower than the verified audience, and a solid review from both critics and audience. IMDb gave it a 7.7 out of 10, which is also the lowest reviewed of the Toy Story movies, but still pretty good. And I used 3 scores on the user reviews that tend to sum up the great, the decent, and the bad reviews, which are the 10s, the 6s, and the 1s. So the 10 out of 10s got about 20.2% of 1,462 reviews, so that's pretty solid. That's about 1/5. The 6 out of 10s garnered about 9% of the total reviews, and the 1 out of 10s garnered about 6.6% of the total reviews, so generally pretty great from user reviews. Metacritic I don't respect enough anymore to even mention their reviews, so I'll just show both of them on the screen and you can just look at it. It's still great for both critics and audiences. And Toy Story 4 also got an A Cinema score, which is great. For YouTubers, I kept it consistent with the last 5 I used in my prior analysis. So I used Sean Chandler, Jeremy Johns, Chris Stuckman, Shafrillis Productions, and the Carlin Brothers. If you're new to the channel, I just take a sample of different YouTubers to get a sense of what their combined reception is. So, starting with Sean Chandler, he gave the movie an A. Shafrillis gave it a 7 out of 10. Jeremy Johns said it was worth buying on Blu-ray. Chris Stuckman also gave it an A. And for the Carlin Brothers, one of them gave it a 9 out of 10, while the other gave it an 8.6 out of 10. So, from this, it's about an A- average, I'd say, or a 9 out of 10. So, from all this stuff, clearly Toy Story 4 was very well received by a lot of people. I will also add that when you get more in depth into a lot of Toy Story 4 reviews in 2019, there were a lot of people that may have given a positive review, but that didn't necessarily mean that they loved the film. Like, there were a lot of people that may have given a high score just based on the technical brilliance of the film, but they still felt a sense of disappointment and felt it was an unnecessary addition to the franchise. So with all that said, I'd sum up the overall 2019 aggregation as a great film, but maybe unneeded. But boy, oh boy, are there a lot of major vocal haters of this film. And I almost don't even know where to put them, whether like in the 2019 or the 2024 section. So I thought it would be best probably to just move them to the 2024 analysis, which I guess is right now. So yeah, we could talk about it right now. So I imagine if many of you typed in the words Toy Story 4 is into YouTube, or maybe even Google, the word bad would probably show up at the top for many of you. There are a lot of analyses, forums, and rankings that are not huge fans of this movie. And I think much of the biggest criticisms can probably be summed up in the most notorious Toy Story 4 hit piece, this video.
This is absolutely pathetic writing. Who approved this abomination of a script? I would catch up with Bonnie, and by the time they get to the town the RV is parked in, it looks like barely any time has passed at all. Who approved this abomination? Do you understand how long it would take toys to travel on the highway? Look how according to the GPS, they were 5.32. Time has passed all by the light. What is happening right now? What is none of this makes any sense. Who wrote this?
So in the midst of a lot of nitpicking, this video does address, I'd say, probably the 3 most common big criticisms people have. One being Buzz being a dope, the second being the lack of the original gang, and the third being the ending. So yeah, a lot of people found Buzz's whole button gimmick pretty stupid, considering that Buzz knows that he's a toy, so he should know that his buttons won't give him any guidance.
Multi-phrase voice simulator! It's a secret mission in uncharted space. It's a secret mission in uncharted space. It's a secret mission in uncharted space.
And when it comes to the ending, many people felt like Woody's decision was out of character and that Bonnie betrayed her promise to Andy. So, you know, since the ending is probably the most controversial aspect of this movie, I'll break it down into 2 camps of people. Camp A viewed the ending as Woody, having always been an extremely loyal and helpful toy to his owner and friends, suddenly decides that when his long-lost girlfriend shows back up and is like, "I like being a lost toy, Woody, and you should too." Look, my voice got extremely deep, alright? That's the closest you're gonna get to a girl voice. Anyways, after Bo Peep is dead set on being a lost toy, Woody decides that his kid and his friends aren't his top priority anymore, abandons all of them, and decides to go live with Bo Peep. Camp B views the ending as Woody, having always been a loyal and helpful toy to his owner and friends, discovers that with life comes changing circumstances and that Woody had fulfilled his purpose in his environment and now could move on to a new purpose that utilizes his strengths, helping other toys find owners, and in the process, not having an owner for himself. and this worldview is embodied in Bo Peep. Therefore, when Woody left at the end, it wasn't just to get smoochies from Bo Peep, but rather to utilize his strengths to fulfill a new purpose. So yeah, those are the two camps, and I say those camps still kind of last to this day, which right off the bat should tell you something about Toy Story 4 nowadays. It is much more divisive than it was in 2019, and is by far the most divisive Toy Story movie. Which, duh. I mean, of course it was no surprise that this would be the most divisive Toy Story movie no matter what, but I'll get into that more in the legacy section. Alright, so moving on to 2024 aggregate websites, I took all 2024 reviews from Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and averaged them together. So on Rotten Tomatoes, there were 59...
Woody.
Okay, cool. As I was saying, on Rotten Tomatoes, there are 59 reviews in 2024. And...
Woody.
Okay, will you shut up already? So of these 59 reviews, the average score was a 3.3 out of 5 stars, which is pretty decent overall for a movie, but especially for Toy Story standards, that seems kind of low. And on top of that, if you were to double this score, you would get a 6.6 out of 10, which is almost like a 66%. Quite a drop from the 91% of 2019. When moving over to IMDb, there were 20 total reviews, and the average score was a 6.9 out of 10. I will preface that with these aggregate websites, they are sometimes known to be a little bit more susceptible to trolling and some pretty unclear reviews. I mean, you just look at the most recent review for IMDb, it reads, "Bad movie. Worst Toy Story 4. Teach kids ignorance. Also fix the map that you show in your animation. Russia is a European country. Educated yourself before putting a map. Bad movie. Worst Toy Story 4. Teach kids..." Seriously, what the heck is this review? It's just a spam repeat of fragmented sentences. Like, I mean, if you were to remove this review alone, the score would jump from a 6.9 to a 7.2 as the average IMDb score. But that's why it's helpful to compile samples from multiple different outlets, as it can kind of diminish the impact that trolling reviews like this can have on the overall reception and overall scores. Anyways, moving on to YouTube, I chose a sample of 5 YouTubers. So I chose Sean Chandler, Austin Burke, Zach Pope, Wicked Binge, and Spilling the Milk. So in 2019, Sean Chandler had Toy Story 4 very high, all the way at number 2, which was probably a little bit of a hot take just after its release, but it certainly would be a hot take nowadays. Which, his most updated ranking after Inside Out 2, it did take quite a drop. He had it down from number 2 to number 7. And it wasn't his top Toy Story movie anymore. He had it below Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 1. So he still likes it a lot more than your average person, but it definitely did decline in reception based off of how he first reviewed it. Then moving on to Austin Burke, he also had a 2019 ranking, but only of the Toy Story movies, and on that list he had Toy Story 4 at number 3, just above Toy Story 2. Then he made a ranking in 2024, and on this ranking he had it at number 16. And he did say it was the weakest Toy Story movie. So again, similar to Sean, it did take a drop in quality for him as well.
That, guys, I love Toy Story 4. I think this movie nails it. It's not on the quality of the first 3. It's just not. That, guys, I love Toy Story 4. I think this movie... It's not on the quality of the first 3. It's just not. That, guys, I love Toy Story... It's not on the quality of the first 3. It's just not. That, guys, I love Toy...
It's not on the quality of the first 3. It's just not.
Zach Pope rated the movie at number 2 in 2019, And in 2024, he had to just bump to number 4, which the top 4 were all Toy Story movies for him. So essentially he thinks it's the best of every other Pixar movie, but the weakest Toy Story movie. So not a huge drop in his reception, but a slight one. Then you have the channel Wicked Binge. They had Toy Story 4 ranked quite low. They did a tier ranking where they had Toy Story 4 at the C tier and specifically at the 25th spot. So they were not huge fans of the film. And lastly, I used the channel Spilling the Milk. They did a ranking of all the Pixar movies except Inside Out 2, but I mean it was still in 2024 that they made the list. And they had it ranked at C tier. So when summing it all up, you have 2 very positive reviews, you have one that's still positive but not on the same level, and you have 2 negative reviews. So I'd say from this sample, the general reception would be slightly positive, but certainly a big drop for the major positiveness of 2019. And by the way, I just included really rankings in 2024. Like there have been a lot of rankings since Toy Story 4 has been released. And in fact, the most popular Pixar ranking was made by Chase, and here's what he had to say about it.
This movie kinda sucked. I guess the one question I have left is, was it worth it for the $1 billion the movie made in the box office? Shame on you, Pixar. D tier.
Even the Carlin brothers, who I mentioned in the 2019 section. In my last video, I mentioned that they made a video at the end of 2019 ranking the billion-dollar films. And even for them, you could see that Toy Story 4 took quite a drop, and they mentioned how it didn't seem to age too well for them. And they also made a ranking a couple years later, and especially for one of the brothers, it took an even more notable drop. That's not to say there still aren't a ton of people who really like this film, but especially on YouTube, you can easily find a ton of people that really don't. Next, I wanted to include some rankings in 2024 from website companies. I think that generally shows more of the critic perspective. So I chose Polygon, Vulture, IndieWire, Empire, and Screen Rant. So Polygon had it ranked at number 26, Vulture had it ranked at number 8, IndieWire had it ranked at number 15, Empire had it ranked number 17, and Screen Rant had it ranked number 12. So as you can see, almost none of these companies had Toy Story 4 in their top 10. While all of these companies were still relatively positive on the movie, the average ranking placement is around a 15 to a 16, which is on the lower end of the Pixar movies. So that can allude to how a lot of people, including critics, have quite a bit of a lower view of Toy Story 4 compared to 5 years ago. But wait, there's more. A couple weeks ago, I did a poll on my channel asking people what their favorite Toy Story movie was. And it got about 227 votes, which is a pretty solid sample size. But boy, oh boy, the results were baffling. In first place was Toy Story 3, which took about half the votes. That's actually to be expected. That's not super surprising. In second place was Toy Story 4? What? Now, I really like Toy Story 4. I do think it's the weakest of the Toy Story movies, so I can promise you I did not bring together a bunch of cronies to inflate the votes on this movie. But the most disappointing thing was that Toy Story 2 came in last place. Like, put some respect on that movie's neck! Anyways, if you look at the comments of that poll that I put out, or even check out the Pixar sequel ranking that I made, you'll find some back and forth arguments over the merits of Toy Story 4. So I think it can be well summed up that this movie is just very divisive. I do think this poll is probably a bit of an outlier, but I do still think there are a ton of people, myself included, that still really do love this movie, but there are a ton of people that really do hate it. While many people love Toy Story 4 for being such a refreshing surprise filled with great humor, animation, and emotional weight, A lot of people see those same things, but they see the opposite, where they see a movie that destroyed a character because of an emphasis on humor, and destroyed another character for its attempt at emotional weight. And lastly, I wanted to include Amino. I always like to include them at the end. I ran a poll asking what people's view on Toy Story 4 was, and here were the results. Before we get into the legacy section, this video is sponsored by nothing. Have you ever sat in your basement and dreamed of running a multi-billion-dollar business that clipped people's toenails for free? Well, nothing will help you with that. Here's even a testimonial from their sole customer. That's good, I think. Don't wait. Join Nothing Inc. Whoops. Join Nothing Inc. today. Use code I'm dumber than Buzz if I believe this and get 0% off. Link is not in the description. Nothing Inc. is a fictional company and has no associations with a hardware company in London. So, of all of the billion-dollar films from 2019, Toy Story 4 may be the hardest one to really categorize in terms of its ultimate legacy, because so much of the external websites may imply that this movie is universally celebrated, but quickly going deeper you will see that it's not. But ultimately, Toy Story 4 just had an extremely uphill battle that it needed to climb because it inherently was always going to be connected to the question, was it necessary? It had the almost impossible task of going up against decades long of nostalgia for many fans and attempt to follow up on what was universally considered a perfect ending. And you know, there are some people that think that this was a great sequel that did enough to justify its existence. Then there are some that think that this was just an extremely distasteful cash grab. And I think both sides could be able to understand some of where the other side is coming from. Like, when you look at Toy Story 4 compared to something like this abomination, I think you could clearly tell that there was way more effort put into Toy Story 4, especially when it seemed like there was nowhere else that the franchise could go. There was definitely more care and effort put into this, where you could see how someone could view this as having more merits than just being a soulless cash grab. However, I think you could also see how people could view this as a soulless cash grab beyond just the simple fact that it's an extension to the trilogy. Like, when looking at this movie, it clearly has a major emphasis on just Woody.
Here's the thing. I wrote down Toy Story 4, aka Woody. They could have just called the movie Woody.
They could. You're absolutely
Almost should
right.
have.
So, why didn't they just call it Woody? Why did they try to connect it to Toy Story 4? Well, a reasonable answer could be in money. Pixar obviously knew that they were likely going to get more revenue by marketing this under the Toy Story name. It's a lot more recognizable and generates a lot more curiosity as opposed to just naming this after the lead character and marketing it as an epilogue. So in that sense, you could see some of the cash grabby-like nature of this. There's obviously a lot more arguments on both sides, but I think it could be well summed up that Toy Story 4 still has a generally positive reputation. I do think it got worse by a good bit since 2019. I think a lot of people were just so wowed by how funny it was and how much nostalgia they felt to see these characters again that they viewed it way higher than 5 years removed, where now some of that charm and allure has maybe worn off a bit and it may feel a little bit more inconsequential and unnecessary. But that really is ultimately always going to be part of Toy Story 4's legacy. It will always be in the shadow of Toy Story 3 to some extent. And now that we have this movie coming out soon, there's a high likelihood that either Toy Story 4 or Toy Story 3's endings will be undone. So there's that too.
Toy Story 5, the toys' jobs get exponentially harder when our toy crew goes head to head with what kids are obsessed with today, electronics.
That's the other element to Toy Story 4's legacy. It kind of is still up in the air. If Toy Story 5 brings Woody and Buzz back together, then it pretty much completely cheapened the ending of this film. If that does happen, then Toy Story 4 may have the reputation as the most pointless film in the franchise because not even its ending really lasted. And even worse, if Toy Story 5 isn't good, then that may completely destroy Toy Story 4's reputation and make it become a staple example of milking a franchise dry and making cynical sequels beyond its natural finish point. So yeah, Toy Story 4's legacy is still kind of pending, but from what we know now, it will always still be connected to Toy Story 3 in terms of was it the proper decision to continue this franchise beyond the original trilogy. Some will say yes. Some will say no.
So long, partner.
But that is still a question that will continue to be asked in the coming years. But that is the video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this video, all the good stuff. Next up is Spider-Man Far From Home. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.